So a lot of people still don't realise that religious trauma is still trauma. I think when people hear the word trauma, they often only think of physical violence, family abuse, or romantic abuse. But trauma can actually come from systems such as religion. It can come from ideology, fear, coercion, shame, and chronic spiritual and religious control. So, yes, religious and spiritual trauma is real trauma. Religious abuse is still abuse, because trauma is not only defined by where it happened, so family, church, it is also defined by what it did to the person. And the main thing is defined by what it did to their nervous system, their actual sense of safety, their identity, and the whole body. So irrespective where it happened, how it happened, it is still trauma. So it also affects a person's ability to trust themselves when this kind of trauma happens. And religion or spirituality becomes traumatic when it creates chronic fear, shame, and hypervigilance. And that is especially in religious abuse, because it causes a loss of autonomy. It becomes a suppression of self. You get threats of punishment, rejection, or abandonment, and that usually includes higher power. And confusion between control and love, or fear and morality. And I think this is the part that a lot of people often miss. Religious or spiritual abuse does not always look dramatic from the outside like it would, let's say, in domestic abuse. Sometimes it looks like being taught that questioning is dangerous or it's a sin. It looks like being made afraid of punishment, whether that's hell, demons, Armageddon, divine rejection, or just spiritual consequences. Being told that your feelings, your instincts, your sexuality, your identity, and your boundaries are wrong. That's abusive. And it can look like scriptures, doctrine, spiritual authority being used to control you under any spiritual authority. And then the punishment looks like shunning, exclusion, withdrawal of love in the name of faith, so to get you back in line. And then it looks like pressure to obey, think less, feel less, silence yourself. It can look like being taught that suffering is noble, resistance is rebellion, and self-sacrifice is a virtue. So, sounds familiar? And it can also look like spiritual bypassing, where real pain gets dismissed with things like, well, just pray more, you need to forgive, or you need to raise your vibration, or you're spiritually blocked. So I think it's important to make one distinction here. Spiritual abuse is how power gets misused through religion or spirituality. Religious or spiritual trauma is the psychological, emotional, and nervous system impact that usually follows. And I think one reason people minimize this kind of trauma is because abuse is often only recognized when it is physical. So unless you're physically hurting, it doesn't really get recognized a lot. And religion also gets a lot of automatic respect in society. And faith can sound harmless from the outside. And because some people have positive religious experiences, it is assumed that everybody does. So survivors of religious spiritual abuse and trauma are often told, well, you're just bitter, you're dramatic, you're taking it too personally, you just get back in line. But the harm here is often invisible and it's internal. And That's the problem. Invisible harm is still harm. So trauma is not only about being hit physically, is it? It's also about being controlled, being silenced, shamed, terrified, and cut off from your own self. How many times do religious people are terrified of hell or Armageddon? So just because the harm came wrapped in religion and spirituality doesn't make it any less traumatic. So yes, religious and spiritual trauma is still trauma, because trauma is not only about where it happened, it is about what it did to the person. And that's a very, very important distinction. So in my next video, I will talk about why this kind of spiritual religious trauma can feel especially invasive and very hard to escape, and sometimes very difficult to recover and heal from. I hope you enjoy that, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.